Hi, good morning, everybody. Just to let you know, I've turned on the recording for the Zoom. So thank you. Welcome to everyone joining us at home. And thank you to everyone joining us today in our sort of new to us area. We're back in the Hamlin room this week. Unfortunately, one of the reasons we're back in Hamlin, smaller room, the speakers were going to work with the microphone. We couldn't make the microphone work today. So if you can't hear and there's room, if we can get you up front, otherwise we'll try and talk loudly. Again, welcome to Third Sunday Forum. My name is Carrie Ospey. We have Eric today helping out with Third Sunday Forum. And just so we have enough time to get everyone, I'm going to turn it over to Rich, who helped set up our forum today. And he's going to introduce our speakers and get us started.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm really happy to introduce our speakers this morning. My name is Rich Freevert, and I'm a member of the Church and Society Action Committee here at the church. Several of our members are here. Maybe just raise your hands if you've been helping with that effort. We've been up and running in our current iteration about 6 or 8 months and working on the immigration issues, a lot of other issues as well. So the title for our presentation today is Immigration Justice and Mass Deportation. Our speakers are Phil Wheeler, who down here in the front is the board chair of the Southeastern Minnesota Interfaith Immigrant Legal Defense, otherwise known as SMILD, and David Perdomo, Benvenido.
Yes.
He was the lead organizer in Rochester for, and forgive my Spanish pronunciation, Comunicados Organizando el Poder y la Acción Latina. Yeah, close. And also my interpreter, Carolina, is with us here as well, who will be part of the presentation. Both of these organizations have been on the front lines of what's been going on with the ICE detentions and with the immigration, and the organizations have been working with immigrants for a long time. But obviously now this has been more in front of our day-to-day lives. So with that background, I will turn it over to Phil. You want to go first? And please welcome them, and I'm looking forward to a great informational presentation.
I've been told I have a very soft voice, so if you can't hear me, move closer. So we're going to talk about, first of all, a disclaimer. Neither of us are immigration attorneys or historians or really experts very much. That's the disclaimers. Secondly, I'm going to talk about context for immigration a little bit. We're going to talk about several ways to be undocumented in under U.S. law. What SMILD has done and what we need to do, and what COPAL has done and what they need to do, and then ICE in Rochester. What they have been doing and the response so far. So first of all, the context. How many of you have ancestors or yourselves came here from some other country? All right, good to know. Now, there are several reasons why people might come here. If you were an African enslaved person, your motivations are involuntary. But for those who weren't African immigrants, how many came here? How many people have ancestors who came here for reasons of religious persecution or religious freedom? And that would be me. Political freedom or political persecution. 2. Escape from war or violence. Economic opportunity. Any other? So just to be clear, did anybody come here to eat their neighbor's pets? I've asked this several times, and so far, even with a fairly large sample, I have 0. So,
So another thing was starvation, like the famine and.
yeah,
Great grandpa didn't want his sons to be in the Prussian army.
okay,
That's the reason I hear.
all right. Those are all good reasons. Still no pets, though, right? All right, another little bit about context. In southeastern Minnesota in the 1870 census. In the order of from 20% to 46% of the people who were here were immigrants. The immigrants were so important that the immigrants and the children of immigrants significantly outnumbered the native-born population. Until 1890, immigrants could serve as elected officials in local and county boards, school districts, and city councils, because there simply weren't enough native-born people willing to serve. We are not overwhelmed by immigration. Our current level of foreign-born population is around 10 to 15%. The notion that we are being invaded, in the same sense that Ukraine is being invaded, is utter nonsense. And by the way, if I say anything that sounds remotely political, that's because I'm speaking also as a member of the Rochester, our regional interfaith immigrant legal, let's see, Rochester Regional Interfaith Immigration Rights Coalition, right? Our political arm. So how to be undocumented? Asylum seekers who cross the border under the current system register with Customs and Border Patrol before they cross the border. And they can, if they've applied for asylum but haven't yet been granted it, they are undocumented. If they have a year to apply, if they haven't yet applied within that year, they are undocumented. But they're both, in all cases, they are here with the permission of the US government. If you cross the border and then check in with Customs and Border Patrol, but you haven't arranged for it first, that's called entry without inspection. And you get an interview that determines if you have a credible fear of harm if you return. In that case, you are permitted to enter. If not, you are subject to expedited removal. But if you're permitted to enter, you have a year to apply for asylum. You may have already applied for asylum within that year. In both cases, again, you are permitted to be here, but you are undocumented. If you are covered by the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, DACA program, you are undocumented because that's created by executive order. If you are from Afghanistan or Ukraine, and you are permitted to be here by what's called the Humanitarian Parole Program, you don't have official status, it can be revoked, and you are undocumented. If you are a Central American minor or subject to some other child protection measure that's included in immigration law, you're undocumented, but you're permitted to be here. If you're a visa holder, you are here either as a tourist or as a student or as an employee whose job has been terminated. You've outlasted your visa, but you've not been removed because you may come up with the tuition to re-enter your school. The scholarship may be renewed. There could be reasons why your visa will be renewed or not, but either way, you're not been removed because you've been permitted to be here. 40% of the people who are undocumented have simply had their visas expire. And it's not an instantaneous thing. If your visa expires, you have some period of time to renew it. If you are and a person who was entered without inspection, but has not presented themselves to the Customs and Border Patrol, so they don't know if you have a credible fear or not. You still have, you are probably more undocumented than most, in that you haven't been given permission to stay here, but you may get permission to stay here, and that's the most undocumented of the categories so far. And then if you decided to seek asylum, but you haven't yet filed, or you had a hearing date and you neglected to attend it, then you are here without permission, basically. And your circumstances is the worst of these 9 different circumstances. So undocumented and illegal are completely different. None of these 9 conditions I've listed are felonies. So at the very worst, they are subject to civil offenses. And point out that our president should know the difference between civil and criminal, because he's been charged and found guilty of both. Nevertheless, he confuses the two, and that let me just say again, that's from the Regional Interfaith Immigrant Legal or Immigrant Legal Immigrant Rights Coalition perspective, not SMILD. Immigration matters here because we have a substantial population of undocumented people. In the region, the 11 counties that SMILD represents, there are between 7,500 and 8,000 people who are undocumented. And those people have between 4,000 and 5,000 citizen children who have at least one undocumented parent. So when we talk about child separation, it happens here. And the reason SMILD exists is because back in 2017, we found out, a number of us found out, not just the many faith communities who are involved with SMILD found out that St. Francis Church was having a session whereby people could do a delegation of parental authority, so that if they were deported, there would be somebody to take care of their children. If they were detained, they would have somebody to take care of their children. This seemed like an egregious harm. And on the 8th anniversary of that, roughly, we'll be doing that again at St. Francis Church over the next few weeks. So that's why it matters here. If we were to talk about self-interest, we'd talk about how in 9 or 12 of the 21 counties in Congressional District 1, we'll have a net decline in labor force over the next 24 years. And that would make immigration a good thing from the get-go. But we're not going to talk about self-interest here. We're going to move on. So we are a nonprofit organization. We are funded entirely by donations from individuals and faith communities and community organizations. We're in our 6th year of contracts with Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota and Advocates for Human Rights. And we're made up of members of our board is made up of members of faith communities and community organizations that support our efforts to provide legal representation for people at risk of removal who can't afford an attorney and who have, in legal terms, at least a snowball's chance of avoiding removal. Your representative, who started last month, is Caitlin Jones.
Cheryl.
Cheryl?
Cheryl.
Oh, well, you know, somebody told me it was Caitlin, okay, Cheryl. Well, we did, put her on the board last month, and so I got an email from Caitlin, and I thought that was Cheryl. Okay, Cheryl, what's her last name? Oh, yeah, Cleaver. Cheryl Cleaver. Well, so this is who I thought it was last night, and I was corrected. I was right. I don't know if Cheryl Cleaver is here, and unfortunately, I think I said it was Caitlin Jones in the service. Okay, so, she took over from Marita Heller, who took over from Larry Seeger, who have all done just an outstanding job for us. So, I said this earlier, but if you have representation, the chances of avoiding removal are 74%. We represent people both in bond removal, bond defense, as well as through the process of the hearings. And we've had about a 90% success rate. One of the cases we lost. One of the cases we lost was a person who was shot in the head by gang members in Venezuela. And they tracked him to Ecuador, and so he had to leave Ecuador. Being shot in the head doesn't count for asylum unless you're shot in the head by a government, or you're shot in the head because you're an ethnic or religious or other type of minority. If you're shot in the head simply for reasons of extortion, you don't qualify. But he's still here because of SMILD and Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, because he's from Venezuela and he can't be deported to Venezuela yet. So thankfully, but he was able to get out of detention due to our intervention. And when he finally went to trial for what he was being arrested for here, the case was dismissed. When he initially was arrested for the thing for which the case was dismissed, the judge ruled that he was free to go without bond and he could return to his house. The sheriff's practice is to hold people to notify ICE and to hold people until ICE can get there if they have an interest. Now, ICE is supposed to detain people only for reasons of a flight risk or a public safety risk. But that is clearly not their practice. They detain people because they seem to like to detain people. He was detained for over 10 months for a crime that didn't happen, for a case that was dismissed. We have other examples. We had a guy whose case we won in March of 2020. ICE refused to release him because he hadn't had a physical exam. We paid for that. His family paid for some, and the UU church paid for half. He passed that physical exam. Then they decided they were not going to release him because they might appeal. By August, they had not yet appealed, so we filed a habeas corpus, I guess, petition. And that meant that was going to go to trial. Eventually, instead of that habeas thing going to trial, the Board of Immigration Appeals met in December and ruled in favor of our client. When ICE is ordered to release somebody, they have 90 days to release them. From December until March, they held this person in detention and they used up all 90 days. He was in detention for a year after winning his case because of ICE practices. Why would they do this? To deter other people from fighting their detention. And it worked. We had people who we said you have a case, and they declined representation because it wasn't worth it. So just my final words before I turn it over to David. SMILD represents a wide range of community organizations and faith traditions, but our moral compasses all point in the same direction toward justice. Thank you.
Buenos días todos por estar acá y escuchar sobre este tema muy importante.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning to hear about this important issue.
Voy a compartir esto para los que están mirando.
He's going to share the screen. So the people that we have on Zoom are able to see. So. You can hear? Okay, I'll try to talk louder. Okay.
Ok, entonces, estamos como organización trabajando desde noviembre que supimos los resultados de las elecciones por lo que vendrían a ser las deportaciones masivas.
So as an organization, we have been working since November because of the elections results. We knew what was going to come.
Y estábamos preparando una campaña que se llama Amamos a nuestros vecinos migrantes.
And we were just preparing this campaign. We love our immigrant neighbors. Since November.
Hemos hecho una coalición casi de 100 organizaciones y personas que nos están apoyando para crear este movimiento.
We have a coalition of more than 100 organizations, community leaders, faith leaders.
Y se llama Immigrant Defense Network.
And the name of the coalition is Immigrant Defense Network.
Entonces, estamos trabajando y en febrero íbamos a lanzar esta campaña abiertamente a todo Minnesota.
And this campaign was going to be launched on February 14th.
Pero en febrero 12, hubieron detenciones aquí en Rochester.
But on February 12th, there were some detentions here in Rochester.
Fueron detenidas, ICE únicamente declaró que fueron 2 personas detenidas.
ICE only declares that 2 people were detained by them.
Pero en realidad, a nuestras personas que nos llamaron de la comunidad fueron 7 personas detenidas, más los 2 del restaurante.
But the truth is that 7 more people were detained on the same week by ICE. So people from the community called us to report these incidents.
Y comenzamos a trabajar con SMILD para saber a dónde se encontraban, a qué lugar fueron llevados.
And we started working with SMILD to find out where these people were taken.
Porque sus familiares, sus amigos no sabían y querían conocer qué había pasado con
Because
ellos.
their relatives or friends didn't know where they were.
Entonces tuvimos una reunión de emergencia con nuestros aliados, voluntarios, miembros y también SMILD que estuvo con nosotros.
So on that same day, we had an emergency meeting with our with SMILD and other organizations to see what we can do or we were able to do.
Entonces el día siguiente, en temperaturas muy frías, desde las 8 de la mañana hasta las 11 estuvimos en Peace Plaza con esta acción.
So this happened on the 12th, and then on the 13th, we did this protest at the Peace Plaza. So we were there from 8 to 11 a.m. and the weather wasn't that was like 23 something degrees.
¿Quién de los que está acá nos acompañó? Porque supimos que de la iglesia de acá nos acompañaron.
We know that some people from this church joined us, so who were there?
Levanta la mano.
You were there, okay.
Okay. Felicidades, gracias.
Thank you for supporting us.
Entonces, ¿por qué hicimos esto? Porque las personas que nos estaban llamando nos expresaban de que ellos no tenían ningún récord criminal ni una orden de deportación.
And why do we did that? Because so families and friends told us that these individuals didn't have any criminal
Orden de deportación.
or deportation, order of deportation, or they weren't criminals, they were just going to work.
Solo iban manejando ese día a sus trabajos.
Some of them were driving to their jobs.
Unos del parking lot fueron detenidos, otros en las calles.
Some were detained at the parking lot, others on the street.
Y también tuvimos el caso de una familia que ellos salieron de su casa y migración o ICE los detuvo, bueno, en Apache Mall, los interceptó y los persiguió hasta Menards del Norte.
So there was a case that 2 men were driving
towards Minneapolis. And I followed them. I believe from, Apache Mall, to
Menards del Norte.
Menards,
En el norte.
the one that is in the north, Orinoco.
Orinoco.
Okay,
Entonces, los persiguió muchas millas únicamente porque los vio que eran latinos.
so they follow them because, of their, aspect
Porque ellos eran latinos.
and because they were Latinos.
Entonces, cuando no les enseñó les enseñó una identificación que era de México, fue ahí donde los detuvieron.
So I asked for an ID and they showed their, ID from Mexico. So they didn't have a driver's license or the Minnesota ID.
Entonces, fueron detenidos en ese
And they were
momento.
detained
Entonces,
that day.
casos como esos estamos mirando, personas que no tenían un récord criminal ni un orden de deportación están siendo detenidos.
So cases like that, normal people not having a criminal incident, or I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that word, but so they weren't criminals or didn't have a order of deportation.
Entonces, por eso estamos elevando la voz, porque no se están violando varios derechos de nuestra
So
comunidad.
that's why we are raising up our voices and defending our community civil rights.
Y también estamos mirando en una pequeña parte qué pasaría si nuestra comunidad es detenida. Son personas que están trabajando.
So we're thinking about what is going to happen if our community is detained by ICE. What is going to happen with restaurants, businesses, and with the economy here in Rochester? It's going to be a huge impact.
Porque con la detención de febrero 12, 2 semanas pasó cerrado el restaurante.
So I don't know
Nupa.
if you heard about Nupa. So they were closed, I believe, for almost 2 weeks, maybe, because they didn't have someone to cook and prepare the food. So 2 weeks.
¿Qué pasa para la industria de los agricultores? ¿Qué pasa con la industria de la comida, con la industria de los hoteles?
So what is going to happen the same with farmer workers, hotels, and other big companies, construction.
Entonces, vamos a ver un impacto muy fuerte en nuestra comunidad.
They're gonna see a huge impact in our community.
Entonces, ahí es donde estamos trabajando con SMILD para proveer ese soporte legal para que las personas puedan regresar a su comunidad.
So we are working very closely with SMILD to provide legal support to the people that have been detained.
Y también hemos tenido apoyo de esta iglesia, de
And we
los
also,
pastores también.
Have the support of the Methodist Church, and we thank you for that. They were providing financial support to one of the families.
Porque el esposo era el único proveedor en su casa.
Because the husband was the only one that works and provides for the family.
Y cuando fue detenido, él llevaba todas sus tarjetas para comprar y para hacer los pagos en su casa.
When he was detained, he has his wallet and debit card, credit cards. So his wife didn't have any money, she couldn't drive, didn't have a car, and she has a little baby.
Entonces, la iglesia apoyó a esta familia para que pudiera tener soporte para un
Your
mes.
church helped this family to have money for rent, food, other needs.
Y también estamos creando una respuesta rápida porque sabemos que esto es un inicio de lo que va a venir en los próximos años
And
para
we
la
were
comunidad.
creating a rapid response because we know that this is not over. We just started, right? We have maybe four years or more. So we need to be ready to support our community and families as well.
Entonces, estamos creando un equipo de voluntarios que quieran apoyar a las familias que en algún momento son afectados.
So we're creating a team of volunteers. We already have some volunteers coming to our office, so we are very happy because of that, but we're inviting you to join us and be a volunteer, join SMILD as well.
También estamos diciendo, donen a SMILD porque también es el apoyo que tenemos para brindar el recurso que necesitan las familias.
So you can donate to Smile, because they're providing the legal representation. Donate at COPAL, we have more resources in our office. We offer the knowledge drivers license for the community, so we're encourage the community, hey, you have to have the driver's license or your Minnesota ID. Do not show your ID from your country or your passport. So for you to be safe.
Ujú. Estamos también dando información sobre conozca sus derechos, tenemos las tarjetas rojas.
The red cards.
Ujú. Y estamos brindando diferentes recursos para que nuestra comunidad avance y tenga una mejor vida.
And we're continue supporting the community with more resources. Something else?
Es todo, entonces es parte de lo que estamos haciendo en la comunidad y respondiendo a este tiempo donde nuestra comunidad tiene mucho miedo.
So that's what we're doing. Right now, the community is very afraid of going out to do errands, go to work. So we're doing know your rights workshops, giving out the red cards and information. We have also legal resources as well for the community.
En la semana que hubieron las detenciones, muchas personas no querían ir a trabajar, no querían ir a la escuela, no querían ir a la iglesia, no querían salir de su casa.
On the week of the detentions, the community didn't want to get out from their houses, go to work, send the kids to school, go to church.
No querían ir a sus citas de médico.
Didn't want to go to the clinic or hospital.
Había mucho pánico en la comunidad.
There was a lot of fear in the community.
Entonces, estuve trabajando directamente con las familias, en los negocios y trayendo un poco mejor de cómo manejar esta situación.
So I personally was working closely with members of the community, business owners,
Para poder traer una mejor calma o traer tranquilidad.
just to let them know what to do, know your rights, what can you do if ICE shows up at your house, at your business,
Ujú.
how can you protect your employees?
Ujú. Y eso traer calma.
And so just let the community be peaceful,
Ujú.
be calm, do not be afraid.
Entonces, en eso estamos trabajando. No sé si hay alguna pregunta o comentarios.
Is there any questions, comments,
Yeah,
question?
do you know how many, or I've heard about how many ICE people are around? Are they still really quite active in the area?
Well, we don't know exactly. During the first week, we knew where they were staying.
Yeah,
And because the workers at the hotel they were staying were concerned about this, they alerted people.
right.
Apparently they've left that hotel, so we don't know how close they are. But we know they're no more than 80 miles away because their headquarters are in Fort Snelling, the local branch. And that's why when the sheriff decides he'll hold somebody until ICE can get there, it's an hour and a half.
So I remember our sheriff saying that he wasn't going to work with ICE, but are you saying that they will still hold people?
They're not involved in any ICE arrest activity.
Okay,
But if somebody is arrested for anything, for, unpaid fine resulting in a warrant, if they're arrested for any sort of warrant, regardless of the grounds, they are required to notify the consulate. In this case, 11 people, they could have notified the Mexican consulate. But instead they notify ICE because ICE can notify everybody apparently. So they justify notifying ICE on the grounds that they're required to notify the consulate. This is an efficient way to notify the consulate. The truth of the matter is they treat ICE as if it were a law enforcement agency important to the public safety.
Yeah.
And because they would let, if somebody was arrested for a felony, and had a pending issue in Blue Earth County, they'd let Blue Earth County come in and question this person. They treat ICE as if they have the same role. They do not. So, my view of it, and this is again, Immigrant Rights Coalition speaking, is that the sheriff is misrepresenting what he's actually doing.
I actually have 4 questions. The first one is pretty much the most important one. About 2 months ago, our ministers were talking about there's an interfaith organization going on how to address supporting what's going on with our immigrants. And my question pertaining to that is, how does your volunteer program integrate with the interfaith community for resources and support?
But question for COPAL?
Either one of you. We've got resources. How are you communicating your needs to our interfaith community so we can support the immigrant families and the needs within the community?
Well, let me take a shot at that. Our interfaith board tries to maintain connections with community groups like the Alliance for Chicano, Hispanic, and Latino Americans, like COPAL, so that we know what the needs are in terms of what our mission is, which is legal defense of people in ICE detention. Because of these connections, we are sometimes aware of situations that need support, and so we try to find resources beyond legal resources. In the case that you're asking about, we found out through COPAL about this family whose breadwinner was picked up by ICE. People from your church attended the rally that COPAL had, and we talked to them, and they identified this need, and we thought this would be a good area to apply resources. In the case of the Unitarian Universalist Church, which I belong to, we maintain an immigrant justice fund with which we support now 2 families of asylum seekers. We support them in part, legal defense and miscellaneous kinds of things. Well, in one case, we're paying rent. And in the other case, we're paying things like transportation that people don't drive. I'm sometimes asked by people in the Unitarian Universalist Church, should I give money donate money to the Immigrant Justice Fund of the UU Church or to the Southeastern Minnesota Interfaith Immigrant Legal Defense? And my answer is always yes. These are not mutually exclusive. Same thing applies to COPAL. We have different things that we're doing to approach this. They're working more on political change and community support, community witness. And we are working on a narrower focus on legal defense. They're both worthwhile activities. So again, my answer is yes. I think your church could identify a family in need and provide support. In addition, you could support COPAL and SMILD.
To follow up on that, there's a grant request in front of the foundation right now that we meet on Tuesday night. Because of that grant request is the reason that 2 different organizations within the church forwarded first $500 each or $1,000 to support this family because of the timing of getting the grant request through the foundation. But there is another grant request. There is more grant requests for another 2,000 in front of the foundation that will meet on this Tuesday.
My second question on this is, in the talking that I've heard both at the service and down here, I did hear the statement made that there are community leaders that are working against immigrants. I'd like to know at what level we have community leaders that are working against the immigrant system. I know we have national, if we have community leaders, I'm concerned.
Y cuando se refiere a líderes, como que específicamente.
You're saying community leaders.
I heard.
So,
I might have
él escuchó lo
misheard.
que dijimos, líderes comunitarios también están apoyando la causa de la situación migratoria, como para apoyar.
Entonces, ¿quieres saber como cuáles están, pues, ahora iglesias, tenemos iglesias,
So
pastores?
community leaders will be churches, pastors,
No, working against.
against.
Your opposition.
No,
Okay,
maybe I'm sorry if I
yeah,
said
that's,
something like that. No.
that's why I wanted to get
Community leaders
clarification now.
have joined us to support our immigrant community.
Okay,
It
so
was
Faith
working
leaders
against,
as
it
well.
was working against.
Well, the only two I can think of who are working against the interests of immigrants are the county attorney who has advised the county sheriff that notifying ICE is a good idea, and the county sheriff who proceeds on that basis. So they're not taking a vocal position, they're alleging that they're not involved. But their practices have been, well, so three of the people who are in ICE detention now got to ICE detention through the county sheriff. A mother of four who was arrested for a trivial thing like a tail light and found out that she had a warrant for an unpaid fine, and she's now in Louisiana. She has a 5-year-old son and 3 older children. So this is, the consequences of doing what they're doing are, I think basically, in defense of the sheriff, I think that he thinks anybody who's arrested is already guilty. You know, it's not that he's discriminating particularly. If you are arrested for anything, you're guilty, right? But the consequences of being undocumented immigrants are vastly more than they are for a citizen.
So arrest does not equate with guilty.
No, right.
I think that's really important to make that distinction.
And-
We have to make sure that an arrest does not equate to guilty. That can only happen in a court of law.
True, and in the immigration court, you are assumed guilty unless you can, you are assumed removable unless you can prove that you have a reason to stay. So that's one of the courts in the United States where basically innocence has to be proved.
Can I just ask, with our county attorney, I believe he's stepping down, right? Are you following closely who his potential replacement may be?
I know that there is a potential candidate who I'm happy to support.
Is it something that you feel like we could go to the county board meetings during public comment and just express support for someone because they're the ones making the decision?
Sure, yeah. And I would pay attention to the whatever campaign materials she puts out.
It's a shame.
Can I interrupt really quick? It's almost 11 o'clock, so if anyone wants to go to 11 o'clock service, feel free to walk out. Pastor Jenny said they can cover for you, so you don't have to get there right away if people have more have questions. If you have a coffee mug you don't want to take upstairs, feel free to put it on one of the windowsills and I'll get it to the kitchen for you. And I think that's it. So,
Can you tell her it's Cheryl Cleaver?
yes, I will tell her it's Cheryl.
No more questions?
My third question is for our church community action committee. I'd like to know how we get more information on what our church community action committee is doing. And how we can participate in supporting what's going on out there, because if I'm not hearing anything, I can't be active and supporting.
I'll be happy to talk to you.
Yeah.
We are working on it.
That's it.
We're working on that.
We're building the plane, it's fine.
Entonces, gracias por la oportunidad que nos han dado de estar acá
Here with you all.
y estamos, ¿verdad? trabajando para que nuestra comunidad se mantenga unida porque somos vecinos y queremos cuidarnos aquí en la ciudad de Rochester.
And we keep working with our community to be together. And yeah, so we really appreciate your presence here. Thank you.
If I could just add one more thing. Our experience at the UU Church with working with, basically 4 families, counting the family of Afghan. Has been really valuable for, as an education to members of the faith community. And also for the people we're helping. The people we're helping are, in desperate need physically, but also emotional support. But the value to us is to understand what immigrants in their predicament are going through. And that's really valuable as an education to our church. I recommend that you do everything.
Yes.
Thank you.
In your examples this morning, you gave examples of people that have been detained by ICE with no criminal reason. Do you also arrange for legal defense for immigrants that have had a charge against them?
SMILD only handles immigration legal defense. But in the case where somebody, so we're handling people if they have an income less than 2 times the poverty level. That's one of the qualifications. If they meet our qualification for defense, they also meet the public defender's qualifications for criminal defense. And so in the very rare circumstances where we've had somebody charged with a criminal offense, we've also helped coordinate with public defenders. And the coordination is really important because county attorneys will try to get a plea to a lesser offense. And if they plead to a lesser offense, that can result in their deportation, even if they plead to a misdemeanor. So it's really important to coordinate those things. And so our immigration attorneys have done that. The most recent case, the initial plea offer was you plead to the 2 most serious felonies and you'll spend 5 years in prison. That plea was rejected. The second plea was you plead to a misdemeanor assault charge and we'll let you go with probation. And on the advice of our immigration attorney, that was rejected also. And the outcome was complete dismissal of all charges. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.